Good morning and welcome. My name is Pam Tipton. I'm Senior Director here at Goizueta Business School on the Executive Education team. And we are so excited to have you join us for this installment of Business Over Breakfast. So thank you for joining us this morning. And as you can see, we are going to be talking about real estate this morning. But if you don't oversee real estate at your company, why in the world should you care? Well, really, it's about a lot of things, but importantly, for leaders in business, it's about business viability, how your business manages long-term costs, employee satisfaction and retention, brand and image, market position, and importantly, scalability. All these are considerations in long-term viability. And guess what? This leads to business acumen for you. So that's why each of us should care at least a little about real estate. And workplace trends are really continuing to evolve today, making it really challenging for businesses to solve for the ideal office space. There's many factors that are affecting decisions in office retail, and that can include things like the rise in hybrid opportunities, especially post-pandemic, the fact that employees are placing greater value on flexibility and convenience, as well as more focus on well-being spaces. And then there's the balancing of the organizational culture, work environment that's necessary for optimal productivity, recruiting, and retention. So while businesses must clearly define their needs for office real estate, it is just as crucial to understand how the trends affect the real estate market and how businesses might best leverage this for optimal real estate economics. So, joining us this morning to share his insight and expertise in office real estate is Hussain Moosajee, or as we affectionately call him, Moose. So he is Adjunct Lecturer in Finance here at Goizueta Business School in Finance, specializing in real estate. He's also managing principal of Blue Horseshoe Real Estate and is responsible for sourcing, shaping, and executing all aspects of the company's residential build for the rent platform. In conjunction with his partners, he's also responsible for asset management of the company's existing office portfolio and acquisition of new office assets. Additionally, Moose is an advisor to startups and investors focused on technology in the real estate industry. So as with all of our webinars, Hussain and Moose will spend the next 30 minutes or so sharing his insights on the real estate market and what we need to be paying attention to and some of the trends that he and his colleagues are seeing in the real estate market. Throughout the session, we invite you to post your questions to the Q&A, and we'll do our best to get to those. We'll also leave time at the end for additional Q&A. But before I hand it over to Moose, I want to highlight, of course, a couple of things that are coming up at Emory Executive Education. Importantly, the application window is open for our Executive Women's Leadership Program. With a blend of in-person and virtual sessions, you will learn and apply frameworks that elevate strategic thinking, equip you to articulate a compelling narrative, and hone your ability to advocate for yourself. All of this in an immersive 3-module program that kicks off in September. Additionally, our registration is also open for all of our MBA level credit granting courses. If you choose to have that credit, you can check out these and other offerings on our website, and one of the members of our team will post links in the chat for you to peruse either now or later. So thanks for joining us. Moose, we're so excited to have you. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Pam. Really appreciate the opportunity that you and Goizueta have given me to present to this esteemed group. So thank you to you, both of you, and everyone joining us today. Now, one other plug that I'm going to do before we dive into the content today is just to talk about the timeliness of this particular conversation about real estate. You know, the Emory Real Estate Conference was exactly 2 weeks ago on May 2nd. It was a sold-out event. This was the 3rd annual major conference that the group has put on, and it was sold out, 700 plus seats. It was held at the St. Regis Hotel here in Atlanta, and is held every spring. I encourage everyone, if you've got an interest in real estate, it is a fantastic conference, really focusing on kind of two areas: the quality of the Emory network within the real estate community and very, very solid thought leadership. Past guests have included Sam Zell, who needs no introduction and is a legend of the industry, who unfortunately recently passed away. So we were lucky to have him share his experience and insights with us. Dean Adler of Bluebird Adler, Roy March of Easthill, and most recently, Chris Lee of KKR. So fantastic conference, a lot of great learning and networking. And once again, I want to underline the most important part. This is 100% student run. So just an amazing conference that they all. So during this conference, one of the topics that came up quite a bit was office. And so that was where we decided to really kind of push the topics that we'll be going through today in the realm of office, and how really the perspective of the user, the tenant, what are things that are important from that perspective. So before I dive into the specifics, I'll just give you a little bit of my background, and that since Pam did such a great job introducing me, I'll really leave it to one point here. And that is that in addition to kind of the work that I do at Goizueta, teaching the advanced real estate finance class, which I do with two other practicing professionals, I am active in the real estate business on a day-to-day basis. So what we're going to talk about here is not just from an academic setting, but also from a day-to-day sort of setting. So these are all a lot of new emerging trends. The data is relatively new, and we're having to kind of read a lot of tea leaves in addition to looking at the data and extrapolating from there. But I just want to let everyone know this is kind of what, for those of us who are in the trenches every day, are seeing, and kind of the direction that the market is going. So coming back to this particular presentation, one of the exercises that I do just to help me make sure that I'm aligning with what all of you are seeing, who are consumers of real estate, but not necessarily in the business of real estate, is to go to look at the headlines. So where I went was Wall Street Journal, kind of the universal business publication, to kind of see what was out there over the last month. So the first one that popped up from April 24th was about Blackstone, headline name that most people would know, and talking about BREIT and redemptions within that REIT. The next one that popped up, which is I think a very pertinent topic for today, is an opinion piece that was put out on April 26th, that remote work is killing leadership. And that is a very rich topic, and one that I know all leaders within companies are struggling with today. The next one was on April 30th, and it was talking about office loan defaults at historic levels, and that this could be a major issue for the commercial real estate business. And the last one that I found, and this was just a quick search over the last 30 days, was companies with rising interest rates are looking for ways to manage the amount of debt that they're paying for. And one of the ways that they're looking at that is through their real estate holdings. So all very immediate, pertinent headlines that came up. And the question that I have for the audience, and I encourage you guys to use the chat to help us navigate this, is, what other headlines are all of you seeing that really make you wonder about what's happening in the real estate business, or what is happening within your companies? What are you hearing within your companies, and questions that we can talk about from there? I really would prefer for this to be a dialogue. We have an agenda, we have slides, but if we never get to the third one, because the dialogue is so rich, that would make this a successful presentation in my mind. So please ask questions, but post the chat and tell us, what are the headlines you're seeing, and what are the conversations within your companies as it relates to real estate. So in terms of kind of what I was planning on going through today, was just talking first about kind of how real estate impacts your business. And most people focus on the financial piece of it, but there's a lot more aspects that I'll highlight as we go through. We'll talk about remote work. Then we'll move into how I've seen companies start to adapt to that hybrid work style and what seems to be most successful. We'll talk about, at a high level for office generally, what are the emerging trends that are starting to consistently come out of this change. Then we'll dive into kind of three major markets here on the East Coast where we have a large presence of alumni: Atlanta, DC, and New York. And then the last thing I'll touch on, assuming we have time, is how these trends within these markets and the trends you're seeing within the use of space as folks are becoming more hybrid in nature, how that relates to your office leads and ways that that can help you in your discussions with your land. Once again, all the way through, would love to get questions. Kavitha is going to help us navigate that and kind of raise her hand when we get some critical mass around a specific question. But I'd love for this to be in. So let's just dive in. First topic is, how does real estate really impact your business? And I already mentioned the operational cost side of things, which is where most people kind of initially go with their thoughts on the intersection of real estate and their business. And that's your rent expense, or if you own, the cost of your mortgage, it's the maintenance and utilities, taxes, insurance, those sorts of. But beyond that, it's actually kind of more aspects of how your business operates that's beyond just dollars and cents. So your workplace design can have a significant impact on your employee productivity and their satisfaction. Things like natural light, collaborative spaces, ergonomic furniture, all of those have a significant impact on workplace and employee productivity and satisfaction. The other one is kind of outside of the building. Where is the office located? How is the commute for your employees? You know, that commute piece is often, I think, prior to the pandemic, something that was often overlooked, and now employers are much more sensitive to it because after going from a zero commute to getting back in the car, it's really highlighting how that can impact employee satisfaction. The next area is workforce management. Your real estate can really have an impact on your ability to have a flexible work model, and how you attract talent. And I'm going to keep on coming back to that theme of talent throughout the presentation, because I think we're in an active shift where real estate and how your talent views your company are really starting to come into focus. But those are two areas where we see the workforce management piece really come into focus in terms of your real estate helping you be flexible or keeping you from being flexible. From a brand and image standpoint, your customer perception of your company can often be defined by the location and submarket of where you choose to put your office or customer facing portion of your business, and who are your tenants that are around you and kind of who you associate with, from a strictly geography standpoint. The other piece is kind of your, what I'd call, the corporate identity. And this is as much an external issue as it is an internal issue. If your company values don't align with all the services that are provided within your real estate, it can really make a mismatch and confuse your employees. The flip side of it is also true. Your real estate can be a tool to reinforce your company mission and values. So corporate identity is a big part of brand image on an internal basis as well. I pulled out marketing and growth mainly because a lot of real estate decisions are made as a snapshot in time, when forward thinking planning of future business growth should also account for what are your real estate needs and how do you best plan for that today in terms of what you think is coming for tomorrow. The other piece of it is proximity to your clients and partners. Making it easy for your clients, customers, and partners to get to you, to interact with you, is a huge part of your decision making on how to utilize real estate. And this is also from customers being able to get to you easily, but to your partners being able to provide supplies. So this presentation is focused on office, but it also can lend itself to other aspects of your real estate needs, such as warehousing and supply chains that support your manufacturing or delivery of products to the market. We've talked about financial considerations from an operational standpoint, but the other piece that often gets overlooked is how does the ownership structure of your real estate impact your taxes? And that's where I think a lot of people often get surprised. And there's advantages that can be taken into account that have to be structured. And then finally, I put up legal as and regulatory components of it. And this is always important just for the health and safety and kind of making sure that those pieces of your business are aligning with your operations and what is required legally, and that also all of your business operations are consistent with the laws and permits regulations of a particular area that you're in. And if your business starts to evolve in a direction that is not necessarily consistent with your existing real estate, then that's always something that has to be taken into account as you're planning. So, as we're talking about planning for the future, one of the biggest things that everyone is facing is the rise of remote. And this is a relatively new phenomenon that has come into our daily lives that really got accelerated due to the pandemic. It was always starting to be there, but it was never thrust upon us in such a immediate fashion as that. Now, there's three buckets that kind of this remote work has sort of been classified in, and I'll transition that in a moment. But the first one is everyone being 100% in the office. The second one is 100% of people not being in the office. And I want to underline that that's not necessarily working from home. It's just not necessarily being in the office. And then the last is the hybrid model, which I think was where um, most companies are settling out. But this change is a significant change to how we work in the corporate environment. And I put this up there with how it's going to change the layout and operations of corporate real estate in the way that the fax machine and email did. It just happened overnight as opposed to over the course of many years. So I want to underline that a lot of what we're going to talk about are trends that are emerging right now. And we're doing our best to look forward into what those could be. But this is still an evolving area of real estate and is something where if we come back together in a year, we might say, hey, three of these trends we were spot on, but one of them ended up going a completely different direction. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about how your company is moving forward with their operations and how that aligns with your real estate needs, because it may be different than kind of what the national trends are, simply based on how your business operates and what your specific needs are, and the fact that all of this is changing.
Because
So,
then we're just going to jump in really quick. We're getting a lot of questions around that first bullet point. What are the trends? How long do you think it's going to be before things settle? And I know that this is a glass ball kind of a question, but people are curious about, when you think things will settle into one of the three or two of the three being most, popular ways that businesses go.
so first, let's acknowledge exactly. So, thank you for the question, everyone. I think that's a very rich topic to talk about. Let me say first that this is kind of a crystal ball question. So, I'm going to give you kind of my view as a snapshot today, but this is still very much evolving, and there's a couple layers to how it's evolving that make this one of those questions where it's going to be a we'll see sort of answer. But I'd say with certainty, the 100% back in the office is very much the minority. And we are seeing less and less of that. I'd say the vast majority are in a hybrid environment where folks are in the office 3-ish days a week. And there's a lot of nuance to that, which I'll dive into in a second. Fully remote is the minority of companies, but we are seeing that with a higher propensity for new startups or international companies that are entering new markets. And so rather than the usual method, which was the first thing you did if you were an international company going into a new company, was to set up an office and an address. It's actually now kind of flipping, where companies are saying much more remote, having one outpost, but finding the best people anywhere in that particular new market, and kind of keeping their foreign operations more remote, and before becoming more of an office with a physical specific headquarters till they get more critical mass. Now, in terms of hybrid, there's a couple of different ways that we're seeing that come about. One is the job function defining how often people are in the office. And this is a whole new intersection of real estate and organizational management that really come together. So what we're seeing is a lot of back office functions that can be done independently and remotely are folks that are only coming in the office once a week, or maybe even once every other week. Those accounting, legal, more process-oriented jobs that can successfully be done through a laptop, not in the office, those jobs are going even more remote. What we're also finding is those job functions often have longer commutes. So there's a higher productivity gain from those functions going remote versus other aspects of a company, such as product design. Those teams tend to be leaning much heavier towards being in office and collaborating. So you might have product design teams that are particularly in a phase of design that requires a lot of collaboration, being in the office 5 days a week, but then throttling back after they've kind of hit some design related milestones. But those groups tend to be your 3 to 4 days a week in office groups. So it seems as though that kind of trend is where companies are settling in, where you do have this hybrid mixture of in office and virtual, but it's really getting divided up by job function and the need for collaboration. Now, I'm going to go ahead and jump forward to one of the slides that is definitely a part of conversation, and that is, in this hybrid world, what about culture, morale, and training? And I'm going to take this in kind of a different order, because I think it ties to one of the last topics I was about to touch on, which is the training of employees and how that relates to hybrid office use. What we're really finding is that with training employees, we're seeing that the companies that are able to do this in a hybrid manner successfully kind of are all following a certain set of procedures. And the first one is having a structured onboarding process. When everybody was in the office, it was a lot easier to just say, hey, go talk to this person. When they come back to you, say, have you checked this thing off the list? Okay, go talk to this department. Let me make a phone call. Being structured about onboarding seems to be one consistent theme that we're seeing for bringing new employees and making sure that they are connected to the right groups and getting that initial set of training. The second that we're seeing is solid mentorship programs. And within the mentorship programs, and I kind of put this in the category of internal networking as well, what is really starting to add value is for your mid-level VP level type of personnel, for them to be networking and mentoring with other members of the team that are of the same level, so other VPs, but have a longer tenure at the company. That seems to be a very positive relationship, and things that have been set up that both the employers and the employees say are very helpful in terms of the mentorship program or that type of networking setup. The other piece of it is making senior level and junior level connections. That seems to be another aspect of mentorship that's more traditional in nature, that help in both directions, where the senior level person is getting more of a feel for kind of boots on the ground. What are the junior level people thinking and feeling, but also the flip side of the traditional learning that comes from that. The other pieces that we see that really work well here is the regular check-ins, the open office hours, and kind of those types of more traditional forms of just open dialogue.
With that, I'm going to jump in with sort of a two-part question. We have a question in the audience on, are there any metrics that measure the effectiveness of in-office versus remote work for different job functions? I know you mentioned a little bit about the roles, but maybe different job functions. And then sort of a follow-on is, how does it affect functions such as like audit and travel? You know, what does that mean for those that have to travel to do certain job functions? So you can shed some light on it.
So in terms of measuring specific outputs, the academic research that's coming out is still honestly trying to figure that out. But one of the ways that they've been measuring is, for example, on accounting, how many days did it take to close the monthly book? And they're seeing that when your accounting team is remote, that's actually happening at 2 to 3 days sooner than it did before. Now, one of the underlying assumptions on all of this is that your business has the technological infrastructure to support asynchronous and virtual communication. So for those companies that do, and I say this is kind of the combination of your Teams, Slack, and your workforce knowing how to use those tools effectively. That's one place where they're definitely seeing the speed at which things are turning around as an indicator of increased. I think the other place where folks are really seeing it is in the engagement of folks using asynchronous tools across various time zones. So the best example that I have read about is proposals for new business coming together a lot faster in a hybrid environment because people are working with these asynchronous tools at the times that are where they are most productive. And if you're on the West Coast and early in the morning, well, that works out great. If you're an East Coast, you're working with an East Coast-based company. But if it's the flip side where you're not a night owl on the West Coast working for an East Coast company, those asynchronous tools are very helpful in making sure that kind of on a 24-hour basis, these proposals are continuing to move. So that's another one where they were able to quantify from a sales team perspective how quickly they could get new proposals completed now. But it's a good question, and one that I think we're all trying to figure out how do you measure that and determine the quality and the speed of output being increased or decreased. I will say that the range, and depending on how you look at it, companies are reporting that they're seeing an increase in productivity based on their definition of productivity of anywhere from 5 to kind of 11% in these hybrid environments. What was the part 2 question, Goizueta, or did I kind of answer that?
Yeah, you touched on the audit. The other was the sort of the travel, and how do you see the changing dynamics affecting travel, the future of travel or job?
So I think there's no replacement for face-to-face interaction in developing a relationship. I think that has to happen no matter what. But I do think that with the tools that we have virtually, what we're seeing is that the amount of travel needed to develop that relationship has gotten reduced. And then for existing relationships that are ongoing, the amount of travel that is needed for that has also been reduced. So I think it's really a combination of what the relationship with the party that you're trying to develop and how that relates to the amount of travel that's needed. But overall, we're seeing that it's actually a lot less. And I apologize for the background noise if that's coming through. Any other questions, or should I jump back to the previous slide?
Go ahead, Hussain.
Okay. I've touched on a lot of these in the Q&A. The one that I just want to go back and highlight is the influence of younger generations. And this is a really interesting topic, because we're seeing that for the younger workers that are coming into new jobs, there's an interesting dichotomy. If you look at the survey results, they're often pressing for more in-office time. When you go past that question and you ask, well, why and what is it that you're looking for? It's that they're looking for the interaction with the more senior level people in the team and ways to learn and get better at their job. When you go the step further and say, well, what is your best method for learning and how would you like your manager to operate with you? It's actually in a hybrid environment. And the interesting thing, if you just stop and kind of take a snapshot of this, a 22-year-old coming out of Emory's undergraduate program was born in 2002. So for someone born in 2002, they've always had high-speed internet. They have always had Google as a resource to answer their question. By their, call it fifth birthday, Facebook was something that we all knew existed. And whether you were on it or about to be on it, social media was a part of your life. They've grown up with all of these tools. So for them, and I see it in the classroom quite often, when they have a question, rather than turning and asking the person next to them, their first reaction is to Google it and then watch a YouTube video to understand how to do it. That's how they've been trained. You layer on that their most formative years of education had been impacted by remote learning from the pandemic. And that's actually their preferred methodology of working and learning. But because the management team has not adapted to them, they are going the only way they know how to get what they need, which is asking for 5 days a week. Now, what's really interesting is senior management is actually the most guilty of not being in the office. So there's a very interesting disconnect that is starting to emerge between the training and the needs of the new younger employees and how management is giving it to them. So I touch on this because I think where we're going to end up, and kind of pulling out the crystal ball here for a second, for companies to, in 5 years, attract the best talent, it's going to be the ones who are doing the hard work today, figuring out how do we do hybrid work the best way, and how do we engage with new employees in this hybrid environment in a manner that is most palatable and consumable for them. And so, there seems to be these two camps in the world of those folks who are resisting and kind of banging their fists on the desk about 5 days a week, come back to the office. And then there's the other groups that are saying, okay, this is reality. We keep on asking people to come back to the office and they keep on settling into 3 days a week. And even those 3 days a week are compressed, where people come in at 10 to avoid the commute and leave at 3 to also get home and avoid the rush hour traffic. And I think in the long run, that will pay you dividends because you'll be getting the better talent. And that's going to happen sooner rather. I'm going to dive into some of the ways that companies are embracing hybrid work, and dive into a few metrics and examples that may be helpful for folks to use as a framework towards figuring out how to move their companies in this direction. I've touched on these, but I'll more formally bring it up that the whole remote work piece is dependent on a number of factors. One is that managers are trained for remote work, and that is a lot of understanding what is the role, what is your business objectives, and how do you align those. So it's not a straight science yet, but it's at least paying attention and trying to navigate that. Communication seems to be a common theme, more frequent than typical because of the remote nature of everyone's location, and using multiple mediums to do so. So it's ways to try to replicate that water cooler type conversation. I'm going to dive into the activity-based working, because this seems to be a pretty consistent way that folks are looking at their space needs in their business, and trying to delineate what is exactly their real estate requirement from them. So the main areas that we've seen consistently come through is looking at, first, how much of your space and how much of your work is designed for focused work. So this is the place where people concentrate and have the least amount of disruptions and are focused on completing a task. The next area that we see in a lot of designs is the vitamin D zone, kind of what it's called. But this is where it's a more comfortable space. Obviously, natural light is a big part of this. And really what it's about is giving an employee a place where they can recharge and kind of reset. The coffee bar is exactly what it sounds. It tends to be kind of in the entry of a corporate setting. And it's a place where it's lively, where employees are directly interacting with each other. There's another area that we call the neighborhood for a day. And this is more your multi-use space. So this is a place where if you need a specific team to come together for a day, for a week, for a month to collaborate, it is a functional space that is designed to have the desks move around and really facilitate that collaboration. That is separate from the flexible team space, which is more dedicated to a specific team and how they operate, although it can be reconfigured for that specific team's needs. So the best example for this is, for a lot of software type work, we see that some of the teams actually prefer to have an enclosed area without windows, and to reduce glare on the screens, and have a lot of boards up that they can throw various forms of code to share with the team and kind of work through together. That's a team space that's going to be completely different than if you're an industrial design team that needs spaces with a lot of natural light and place to put a prototype down, let it run, interact with it. So that's flexible space, but it's specific to the team. The town hall space, I mean, I think this one's one that is pretty self-explanatory. It's the auditorium, if you will, for everyone to come together. Now, what is really interesting is, as companies start to go through these processes of studying what is our real estate, what is our business, and how do these different pieces of work align with how we lay out our business, we're seeing space reductions of anywhere from 10 to 50% off of space that was designed just 10 to 15 years ago. So this is one where you see that alignment of making sure your real estate supports your business functions, and in doing so might actually result in a cost savings to you as well, which in some cases is particularly significant if you're in a space that was designed for all team members to be there 5 days a week, kind of at their desk performing similar functions. I've touched on this in the Q&A, but underlying all of this today is the technology. And if you don't have the collaboration tools and the smart office technology, then this obviously becomes a lot. So keep in mind that a lot of what we're seeing and what I'm referring to are companies that have really made that investment. And that investment is not just having the tools, but the investment in using. We've touched on culture and morale and training. So unless there's any questions, Goizueta, here, I'm going to just keep on moving forward. I wanted to just kind of run through, as part of this, giving some actionable tools and frameworks to folks on questions that we see a lot of groups ask, and kind of the process that they run through towards designing the right space for their needs and making sure that there's alignment between the business goals and the real estate. And I'll just kind of run through this. But the first place that seems to be where everyone who does this effectively starts is just inventorying their employees on the existing office space. What's working, what's not. But the employee surveys are a very rich way of doing that. And it has to be done in a couple different ways to be effective. But it seems to be the first place that folks are starting to get their kind of baseline of where are we at, where do we need to go. The next place is thinking about future needs, and this is really aligning with your business strategy divisions and saying, where is the company going, and what are the functions that need to support that, and what are the real estate needs of those functions. So very much bringing in a new aspect of the business with the real estate that we don't always see, because companies haven't been having to respond to the economy nearly as fast as they're having to these days. And so that interaction with business strategy and real estate and corporate strategy and real estate is one that is becoming more. There's also, as it relates to this, kind of more of the typical things that you just want to make sure you're checking off a list, which is, as your company is growing, who are the type of employees that you'll need to attract, and what are the amenities that they're looking for? Things like transit, conference rooms, restaurants and coffee shops, more of the traditional checking on the list, but focusing on who are the users of the space in the future, and making sure that to the extent that you can, align the real estate to that. Market trends is a big one as well, and we'll dive into that in context of what is happening in Atlanta, DC, and New York. But also, you just have to take into consider what is available, and how much of that aligns with what your business needs are. We've touched on this quite a bit, but I'll go ahead and underline it. Understanding your work. Are you going to be a 100% remote company? Are you a hybrid? Are you going to be in office? And within those, what does that mean? And with the hybrid model, a lot of this is also focused on which teams are going to be in the office more than others, and what days of the week, and how do you schedule that to really maximize the efficiency of your real estate use, and what you're actually going to plan for in the future. Location strategy is what I would consider kind of tried and true of real estate. How does it impact your employee commutes and satisfaction? What infrastructure is in that submarket, such as public transit or major highways and amenities? Within that submarket, what are the more preferable micro locations for your business versus other locations?
Hussain, on that topic, can you talk a little bit about sort of the decentralized business functions concept of office locations? And we do have a question from the audience on, does public transport have, an impact on higher acceptance of in-office work?
So I'm gonna take that answer, or that question, in reverse order. But those are great questions. So in terms of the public transport, that is a market by market sort of issue. In general, we are seeing public transport being less important to employees than it was pre-pandemic, but that trend is shifting. We are seeing more and more people going back to using public transport as traffic of traditional methods of commuting start to increase. So I think in the long run, that will be an amenity that employees will look for. But it's very much a market by market basis. So for example, if you are in a DC or New York or San Francisco, your proximity to public transport is much more important than it would be in Atlanta. And that is just based on the culture and the now, in terms of the decentralization of companies, the original model was the large corporate campus. Everybody came together, all the job functions in the same place. You went to your respective building, you did your work, you hopped in your car, you turned around, and what we are starting to see companies do is experiment with what I'd call the hub and spoke model, where there is one main headquarters, but there are many other smaller offices that relate to specific job functions in locations that are closer to where those employees all operate and live. So, for example, you might have the official headquarters for a company be in Midtown Atlanta, but the accounting function for that company have a small office, a spoke, if you will, that is in Alpharetta or McDonough, wherever those employees tend to congregate. And those functions don't necessarily need to be with the corporate headquarters at all times. The other piece of it that we see is and I refer to product design, those heavy collaborative types of job functions being focused in headquarters, and more of the back office also going to locations where it's cheaper real estate closer to where the employees live. And the amenity base is different because your employee base requires different amenities as well. But we are starting to see, and it's an interesting intersection, once again, of real estate and organizational design that has been broken apart and separated, that is a relatively new function, if you will. The other interesting aspect of this is the use of co-working. That has really accelerated in the last, like, call it 4 years, where even large corporate tenants, in order to make their real estate more flexible, if they have a specific issue or product that they're trying to put out the door and they want folks to concentrate and kind of be out and think in a whole new way, we're seeing large corporate users come over and take significant space in WeWork or an Industrious, as an example, and take 3 months, drop a team in a completely separate location, and use co-working as a way to provide a new environment and a new real estate paradigm for those teams to focus on. And that is something that's really new, and also a way for companies to reduce their existing real estate footprint that they're paying for on a daily basis, and kind of flex and surge when they need, using these more short-term types of real estate products, and ones that have a variety of locations with them. So if you've got a partner that is in a location where you don't have an office, but you want to focus in on a specific type of work, rather than having the partner bring their entire team to headquarters, your relevant team members go to them and set up a shop in one of these co-working locations. So another new emerging way that folks are using real estate and decentralizing into more of a hub and spoke.
So we're getting some exciting questions about specific markets, quite a bit around New York. I think that kind of makes way for some very interesting slides you have towards the end. We also do have a question on what do you foresee in the future for office space being converted to residential use, given the changing dynamics?
Well, you kind of teed up the next phase of the discussion. So we're going to talk about 3 markets in particular, but I'll just quickly kind of go through what we're seeing as broad brush sort of trends in the office market. And tying off of your last question, if we just jump to the bottom bullet on this slide, the office conversions to other asset classes, mainly multifamily, is just generally coming out as being too expensive to really be meaningful in terms of increasing multifamily supply or reducing the amount of vacant office. So it's not a needle mover, but I will say the one place where there is potential that this could change is in the DC market, where there are some heavy incentives to offset that expense. So we might see more in the DC market based on incentives that are coming from the government to make that happen. But in general, if there's no incentive right now, it's a very, very limited supply of office buildings that can be converted. And it's for a variety of reasons. But the main one being the HVAC systems for an office building are designed for the entire building, not individual units. And the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. Those buildings are not designed to have multiple kitchens and bathrooms. And so just the cost of retrofitting the infrastructure of the building to support a whole new use has proved to be really cost inefficient relative to just building. Going through kind of general trends on the specific markets, I don't think any of these, based on the conversation that we've had thus far, should be a surprise, but office vacancies are generally just up across the board for all the reasons that we talked about. Users of real estate are still trying to figure out in this new hybrid environment, how much space do they need and how are they going to use it? Generally, we are seeing tenants are shrinking their real estate footprint. In the Atlanta market, we're starting to see a pretty consistent trend of about a 30% reduction. So that's meaningful. Now, on the upside for the real estate owners, new construction is down. So that new supply risk is definitely limited. And then the last part of this is sales transactions have been very limited. So it's tough to know the exact valuation of assets. But there is a material bid-ask spread that is just going to take time to resolve itself. But ultimately, from a tenant perspective, I think now is a good time, regardless of your market, to kind of quote unquote trade up into nicer assets or nicer locations than you may have considered previously. But I will say that one of the consistent themes here is that landlords are hesitant to want to write big checks. So the place you're going to see flexibility is, in the type of the length of the term of your lease. Other non-monetary components, such as how much of a security deposit do you need to have, or the credit level. You used to not be considered grade A credit for a Class A office building. Landlords are willing to be more flexible. Now, I know we've just got a couple minutes. I'm going to quickly breeze through the market specific information. For Atlanta, I think the key thing here is just keep in mind that we're talking about the MSA for all of these. So it's a very large area. And we're also talking about Class A, B, and C office buildings. And that's just a way of grading the level of amenities and quality, and thus how much rent a particular asset could charge. Worth highlighting, there's two aspects of vacancy. One is traditional vacancy, which is actual vacant space ready to be leased tomorrow. And then there's a concept of sublease space, which is existing tenants taking their unused space and trying to release it to somebody. So the simple example is, think of a college student, and their parents lease the house, and then they lease the individual bedrooms to the son or daughter's fraternity or sorority sister. The sorority sister or fraternity brother is the sublease in this kind of scenario. So when you take that into account, Atlanta is actually at approximately 30% of office space being available. So that's significant when you combine what's immediately available and sublease. Jumping to the DC market, similar sort of thing. Couple items that I'll highlight here is just when you add in the vacancy and the sublease, you're at approximately 20% of space available. That's the largest amount they've seen in about 20 years. And the current national average is about 17%. You know, the last point I'll just make here quickly is that we're talking about averages. So, you know, if you're in the CBD or kind of East End, the higher end submarkets, the rents are ranging to $55, $60, while suburban rents are 25 to 30. Concessions are increasing this market, and unfortunately, I think the forecast seems to indicate that this market will continue to see softening, which is good from the tenant perspective for the next 2025 and 2026, the next 2 years. And then I'll end quickly on New York. Whoops. This market, similar sort of thing. We're looking at around a 20% vacancy overall with lease and sublease. Market's a little stronger here. They're only anticipating that rent declines will occur through 2025, and they start seeing a recovery in 2026. But I just want to underline that this is another very large MSA. And so, you know, we say $57 is the average, but if you're looking in Manhattan only, it's $75. And then within Manhattan, if you go to Hudson Yards, it's, you know, $150 a foot. So very much a law of averages that you have to take it.
Hussain, we're almost at the top of the hour. My colleague Pam Tipton will close us out, but you shared some amazing insights. We do have one question, which is sort of a
Hey,
fun
Kavita,
Yeah.
I think we'll need to just transition. I appreciate the fact still got some amazing questions that are remaining, but we want to make sure we end on time. So I want to join you in thanking Moose so much for joining us today to share your insights. We've had so much going on in the chat and the Q&A. So we're really glad to have you on this topic that's really been top of mind for a lot of people about balancing this idea of remote versus in-office work. I want to quickly share what's coming up next for our Business Over Breakfast series. So first, navigating change. It is one of the hardest things that leaders can face. And so join us as Karen Golden-Biddle shares her experience and, quite frankly, a lot of research and many fun and compelling stories that help us understand how important discovery is to the process of leading change. Hence her title, Return to Discovery. And then on June 20th, join us as well for Christian Hoffel. He is a cultural expert, and companies are only as global as their employees are, frankly, in how to understand the cultural differences and distinctions as we work across the globe and how to navigate some of those gaps. I think that'll be a really interesting conversation. Then, as I mentioned at the top of the webinar, we have our applications open for our Executive Women's Leadership Program, as well as our MBA level courses. We hope that you'll check those out online, or feel free to reach out to our colleague, Heather Dufault, via direct email. She's happy to answer any questions for you in helping you or your colleagues level up their career. And again, Moose, Hussain, thank you for joining us today. And thank you for all of you as participants for joining us. Congratulations to those of you who have graduates in your family. We had our Emory graduation over the weekend, and it was just incredibly inspiring and exciting. Hope you guys have a great rest of the day. Take care now.